the Teaching Tax Flow podcast, where the goal is to empower and educate you to legally and ethically minimize taxes paid over your lifetime.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Teaching Tax Flow podcast, episode 86 today. We are going to take a look at what's the 411 with 529 plans. But before we do that, let's take a brief moment and thank our episode sponsor as always.
This podcast is sponsored by Reps Tracker. Are you a real estate investor who is bogged down with the huge tax burden? Real estate investing can open the door to powerful tax benefits. Reps Tracker can streamline the process of accelerating these opportunities. To take advantage of a special TTF community discount, go to teachingtaxflow.com/reps, REPS, and use the code IFG. Better yet, click on the link below in this episode's show notes to go directly to the Reps Tracker sign-up page.
Welcome back, everybody, and how about this episode title? It's kind of catchy, huh? It's the 411 with 529s. I would love to take credit for it, but I can't, because this guy, Chris Pacquiao, actually came up with it. Mr. Captain Creative, keeper of all tax knowledge, and some other inappropriate names I could probably come up with, but we'll keep it very, very PG. Chris, welcome back, man. What's happening?
Oh, it's great to be back. And one of the things we have to remember in life, you said keeper of tax knowledge, which I appreciate that compliment, but knowledge does us no good if we don't share with the world. And we've got one of the main reasons we did Teaching Tax Flow as a concept and created this podcast. You and I, as a labor of love, because we are, I know this might be shocking, we're not paid handsomely for doing the podcast financially. Doesn't mean we don't have some financial benefit, but it's definitely a labor of love, and we really want to build a community, and we learn from each other. So thank you for this nudge to consistently share any knowledge I have and not keep it.
Yeah, you know, we'd smack you around a little bit if you try to keep it all in there. And I say this too, because this topic we're going to look at today, right? 529 plans, so college savings plans. And before we get into it, I mean, honestly, again, as I say pretty much every show, it's kind of like the informal disclaimer. I am not a tax pro. So I look at these topics through a different lens than I think, you know, yourself, your team, etc. might do it, right? So like you guys are looking at it from much more of a tax perspective. I'm looking at it really from more of your average Joe. So like this topic to me is very broad in a sense, although it's topic specific. We're going to talk about really what these plans are, but then even beyond, you know, their name, college savings, how it can benefit you come tax time. So that's why I'm super interested in this one.
This is a really good topic. There has been some expansion of what the 529 plan can do for you. There's also a new rule in 2024 under the Secure 2.0 Act that we will unveil at the end of the show. So don't just listen to the first half. You're going to want to know what's going on. Now, we talk about teaching tax flow, John. You know, there are 3 laws of teaching tax flow. One of them is that the tax agencies are your involuntary business partner, meaning tax laws are written to encourage and discourage certain behavior. With the rising costs of college and university and the popularity of the Roth IRA, Section 529 was created to help people save for college and to allow them essentially to at least use after-tax dollars or tax-free dollars to pay for qualified education expenses. Hence, 529 plan. Now, a 529 plan is a state plan. So each state offers a what's called a 529 plan. And what's interesting is you don't have to live in that state for you to basically involve yourself or invest in that state's 529 plan. So, for instance, our 529 plans are actually West Virginia. I've only driven through West Virginia, and it's been a long time. It's been a decade since I drove through West Virginia when we lived in Michigan, driving down to Myrtle Beach when the kids were itty bitty. But, they offered the family of mutual funds that are my business partner and financial advisor recommended that we take advantage of.
And you pretty much answered my question there. So like, why would somebody look at a different state than one they reside in or might go to college in the future, et cetera? You pretty much answered it there. It's basically the collection. It's the investment accounts or the investment setup, which obviously is different per state.
Absolutely. So we are getting encouraged by the government to invest money for future educational expenses of people that are close to us. The other thing is, remember, there are 4 different color-coded diagnoses based on your marginal tax rate in the teaching tax flow system. The one that I think is the most important and most underused is the gold diagnosis, tax-free income and growth, because it's pretty much assumed that tax rates, marginal tax rates, are going to go up in the future. So to be able to have assets grow tax-free is a very powerful thing. Instead of giving, let's say I put $10,000 into just some random fund, it became worth $100,000, and I decided to sell those investments and pay for my child's college. I would have a taxable event of $90,000. Who knows? I could owe $30,000 of tax. Now I just gave a third of my profit or capital gain. I know there are long-term capital gain laws and rates to your business partner. So that's why 529 plan, gold diagnosis. Let's dive into what it is, some of the benefits, one thing you have to be aware of, and then that spoiler, the new rule with the Secure 2.0 Act.
Awesome. And Chris, you know what? I'm going to throw you a wrench because I haven't done that in a while, right? So I'm sure there's a fair amount of people that are wondering, oh, well, this sounds great. Makes total sense, right? I forgot, and I don't even know if they're still around, right? I remember getting these in the mail like 10 years ago about, Gerb. It was like the Gerber, education fund or whatever. I don't know if that's the same thing. But with today's kind of educational climate, if we will, right? And you don't have to answer this right now, but just kind of keep it in mind, maybe answer it down the road. What if somebody doesn't go to college, or does it apply to certificate programs, online education, et cetera? How does that look compared to their traditional 2 or 4 year programs that, we grew up?
That is John, sometimes you have some questions, as the kids say, are mid. Mid's the eh. Your kid, your daughter might be too young to say that, but that's what the word on the street is. Like, this question is not quote unquote mid. This is a very good question.
Oh, I'm getting a big
question.
Head. All right, let me sit up a little straighter here. If you can hear my chair squeaking around now, I just grew 3 inches. Okay, I'll take it.
Cooper's running around probably excited that he's like, oh, Dad had a good question.
Yep, but they come out very far and few between. Normally it's a bad one. So
when 529 plans were established, which probably 20 years ago, something around there, I can't remember exactly, there was restrictive of what they could be used for. But because of the concerns that you just threw out there, the use of them has been expanded. So let's talk about what a 529 plan is. It's a special type of account that an adult is typically the owner of, and a child is the beneficiary. You can always change the beneficiary, which is a strategy to hedge against if that certain beneficiary, i.e. student, doesn't use the money for the originally intended purposes, education expenses, quite easily. So if I start a 529 plan, it's in my name. I'm the owner of the plan. And for instance, my wife and I have 3 529 plans. We have 1 for each child. Luckily for my 15-year-old, he was born in January of 2009. My daughter was born March of 2010. The stock market took a big dump, for lack of a better term. So their plans have performed extremely well. My youngest was born in 2013. But each of them has their own separate 529 plan account. I'm the account owner. They are the beneficiary. You don't have to be a parent to establish a 529 plan account for a beneficiary. You could be a grandparent. You could be a rich uncle. You could be a very nice neighbor and do this. So from a parent planning perspective, I've always found that if you establish a 529 plan for a child, especially when they're really young, let's say they're making their first Holy Communion, let's say they're turning 2 or 1. My wife and I always encourage them, yes, my child is 1 year old. They would like to rip something open. They don't know what the heck they're ripping open, but they want to rip something open. So instead of buying a really expensive toy that they're probably going to step on or put in their mouth, kindly buy a toy for them to open, and then the rest we will happily put in their 529 plan for them. So it actually encourages, and I think people are more benevolent around your family when they know where the money's going to go. That's just my own personal opinion. If my family ever listens to this podcast, sorry, you were duped a little, but I'm pretty confident they will not listen to this podcast. They should listen to this podcast.
That is one thing. Maybe that's what we should do for the holidays is, give a QR code and put it in an envelope and give it to our family members. Be like, this is the best gift we can give you, is having to listen to us more.
Yeah, and I actually got that idea from Brooke Aker, CFP, Certified Financial Planner, it's funny we're talking about 529 plan and kids because she now was on our podcast about long-term care. So, and she has she's a big friend of the program and has a lot of great ideas. But all right, let's dive into 529 plans though. So it's a special type of account or plan, account that you can contribute money into, and that money is invested. That money is invested into different portfolios of stocks and bonds and what, just like any other brokerage account. Now, when the money is put in, from a federal tax perspective, there's no deduction for it. So if I put in $10,000 into my child's 529 plan and I was a Michigan resident, I don't get a federal tax deduction for that. Now, some states do allow for a state tax deduction for contributions into a 529 plan. So in Michigan, I think the max is $10,000 per family. But let's just talk about the federal side. No deduction on the federal side. That $10,000 goes in. I'm the account owner. My child is the beneficiary. That $10,000 is allowed to grow tax-free. Now, we know the rule of 72 says that money is going to divide 72 by the return. So if you're getting an 8% return, your money will double in 9 years. Let's say it's a baby. The money will double 2 times by the time they're 18. So easy math, $10,000, if I put it in when the year the child was born, could conceivably and reasonably be $40,000 when they're 18 years old. At 18, they're extremely smart. They begin to attend the Michigan State University instead of any other Big Ten schools.
The ones that go unnamed by yourself, I imagine?
Yes, unnamed. Or wherever they attend, that money could be used throughout their college years. And so if they get a tuition bill for $7,000, room and board for $6,000, you can use the money from the 529 plan to pay that. And the entire gain from the $10,000 to the $40,000 is now tax-free. So the number one benefit, one, is tax-free growth, meaning on a year basis, as that $10,000 became $40,000, if the mutual funds and investments paid dividends and interest, you didn't have to pay tax on any of that. So you have tax-free growth as a benefit, and then tax-free withdrawals, just what I described. And what you alluded to is that what can you withdraw the money for tax-free? It used to be rather restrictive. But withdrawals from the 529 plan are tax-free if they're used for now what we call qualified education expenses. So that goes beyond just room and board. That includes tuition, fees, books, supplies, and room and board. So for instance, if, especially books, I mean, people, geez, we're showing my age when I say that I used to, buy books and sell them back. But I'll give you an example. A lot of places require students to have a certain computer, a tablet, some type of maybe an advanced calculator, some type of most likely software, something beyond just the room and board and the tuition as an expense. So those are eligible expenses for a tax-free withdrawal.
And I imagine previously too, it would probably, and I'm just guessing, right? It was probably very restrictive in a sense that it would say, okay, well, you must attend one of these small list of institutions, but it was probably a little bit more, we'll say direct maybe, where like University of Phoenix probably wasn't on there, even though that they were growing in popularity and all these other things. So I imagine that, as we were chatting through this, the gates have kind of opened up a little bit because really the world now has realized that there are all types of other institutions that people are attending, right? So, for example, I know a lot of people that are in construction. Some of the individuals that make the most per year that I know are actually in the trades, where previously that probably wasn't even an option. Correct?
So, right, let's talk about what higher educational institutions or organizations qualify for that tax, because the money's going to grow tax deferred. That tax-free withdrawal is important. You named it college and universities, but it also includes vocational and trade schools. Like you said, that those technical, if you're getting into, being an electrical worker, or you're becoming
You could be like a plumber, a welder,
line worker. I'm sorry?
You could be like a plumber, a welder, an electrician,
absolutely,
machinist.
And they are very, very high demand. Community colleges qualify. And even apprenticeships qualify as long as it's certified by the U.S. Department of Labor. So it could even be a cosmetology school. It could be something like that. So those have always been eligible for that tax-free distribution. The one thing that changed a few years ago that really helped is that you can now take a distribution of up to $10,000 per year per beneficiary for K-12 schools. So, for instance, my oldest son decided to go to a private high school, and he just finished 9th grade. I could have, and I'm deeply considering. I didn't do it last year, and I just, sometimes it's the plumber that has the leaky pipes, right? True story, man. And you know me well. I didn't even think to me to take some money out of his 529 plan to pay for his high school. I could have done it last year, and I was just thinking like, oh, I could take $10,000 out of his account for 24 and pay a portion of his high school tuition and tax free. So K-12 now qualifies, which is amazing. And that's public school. So if public schools, if you have any type of tuition, usually you wouldn't have tuition expense at public school, but if you never know, you could have that private or religious K-12 schools. So that really opened things up, and that minimized the amount of people that have money in their 529 plans at the end of the rope. Let's say they graduate from college with a bachelor's degree and there's still money in their 529. So that remedies that.
And actually, this just makes it really, in my opinion, right, much more attractive and comfortable to invest in now. Like, say, for example, right, if we were talking about online educational programs 20 years ago, people would be, what? Like, you can't teach things online. Like, that's impossible, right? So things change. So even now, right, like, just seeing that, the government has stepped in and opened the doors to accommodate the new, again, educational climate, if you will. It's much more comforting knowing that, like, hey, you know what? They're just not going to pigeonhole you into one little category and you have to stay within that, or, you're SOL. So it's good
Absolutely.
to see that they open that up and recognize that, right?
So in a lot of things, yeah, so there's that one, it opened up what it could be used for. In theory, you can use it anywhere between kindergarten and in a doctoral degree. It allows for tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals. I already talked about some states have a benefit or a deduction on the state return. It also helps in estate planning benefits. Right now we're in an estate planning environment where, people could have almost $13 million in their estate. Well, after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires, that's going to go down significantly. So the landscape of estate tax is going to change back to what it used to be, in my opinion. And what that means is that if you have grandparents that have a significant amount of money in their accounts that they eventually want their grandchildren to have, they should consider funding 529 plans, because right now they can fund up to $17,000 per year per grandparent. So if you have imagine grandparents that are concerned about estate planning. The estate planning rules change. I mean, this might seem extreme, but let's say they've got a few $1 million. Their health is kind of going downhill. They've got 10 grandkids. They could ultimately move $340,000 per year, because they each could do the $17,000 into 529 plans, tax-free, get it out of their estate and get it growing tax-free for their grandchildren. That is ridiculously amazing. One other thing, and I'm going to mention on the estate planning benefits. There's a special rule that allows taxpayers, if they contribute more than the annual estate gift tax limit, to do a 5-year average. This was very popular in Michigan back when the MET came out, meaning some states offered a prepaid tuition opportunity for their kids. But the point is this: let's say grandparents are they want to put $100,000 into a 529, front load it basically for this child, get it growing tax free. Instead of them having to take that $100,000 minus their annual gift tax exclusion, they can average that over a 5-year period. And there are some limitations based on income. But the point is, if you're listening to this, and if you're still listening, you're going to get my special treat at the end here on the new tax law. But if you're listening to this and you have young ones that are in a family that's educationally minded, this is an amazing tax strategy that a lot of people don't use. And remember, one other remedy, John, would be, let's say you have 2 children. Maybe you put the 529 plan in the name of one parent's name and the beneficiary is the older child. And if the older child doesn't use all the money, then you move to the younger child as a benefit. You can always change beneficiaries. There's no gift tax implications because you're still the account owner.
And a question for you, and I apologize if you did mention this one too, but say you start a 529 plan for a 5-year-old child, right? The intent is higher ed, and say they never step foot in a classroom post high school. They don't pull from this for K through 12, no trade school, nothing. What happens at that point?
So at that point, you've got a couple options. You could change the beneficiary to someone else. You can, you could maybe keep him as the beneficiary, and then if they have children, change the beneficiary to their children. You could put it in if you took a distribution and it didn't get used for education expenses, then all that growth is now going to be taxable, which is a problem. Or there's not a required minimum distribution, or the thing we've been holding back on, a new rule with the Secure 2.0 Act, starting in 2024, this year. If you have money in a 529 plan that was not used for education expenses, you can actually take that and roll it into a Roth IRA, which gives you a lot more flexibility and still can grow tax-free. There are some rules. The money has to have been in the 529 plan for at least 15 years. And at this point, the rollover is limited to $35,000 over your lifetime. But that's a huge remedy for people with extra money in their 529 plan. Put it in the Roth, and now there's no RMDs on Roths and required minimum distributions, and that can grow tax-free. So, John, if you and your wife, have the 529 plan for your daughter obviously goes through, becomes a brain surgeon or something fantastic, but she was very gifted, so you didn't use all the money. And you and your wife would say, we got 20 grand left in this 529. Let's roll it over to a Roth. Let's let it sit there for a few years. And then let's go on a cruise or something and celebrate how great my daughter is. All tax-free.
Well, that's the plan. That's the plan. That's the whole, you literally just laid my whole plan out right there. So thank you for reading my mind. But honestly, I think, Chris, we hit all the good points on this, or I should say all the angles of approaching this. I think we obviously defined what a 529 plan is. We broke down where it can be used previously, but then also today, right? So how the IRS, or we'll say the federal government / IRS, everybody kind of collectively has expanded those boundaries in the formats or classrooms per se where it can be used. But then also that's a pretty big nugget you dropped there as far as for some tax news on just being able to roll that over. And I wasn't aware of that. And we talk about this stuff all the time, and I didn't even know that. So I think that's pretty important. So is there anything else you'd want to share on this topic specifically before we kick you off your own show?
I think we've covered a lot of great bases. 529 plans can be a great tool for not only helping with family educational expenses, but tons of tax planning opportunities. If you have questions, shameless plug, just jump into our Defeating Taxes private Facebook group at Facebook, defeatingtaxes.com. John, once a week we have questions on 529s. We got tons of great content. And if your questions get more in depth, we're going to make sure that we're connecting you with the right person in the teaching tax flow community, a financial advisor that can help you with that plan and pick the investments.
Excellent. And on that note too, that is the person that somebody is probably best suited to go speak to about starting one, right? Would be a financial advisor, and maybe stay away from just the random ads that pop up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely want to work with a financial advisor and a tax pro, right? Because you do need to be aware of some of the tax benefits, but also, again, making sure that if you're guardianship front loading, being aware of the gift tax responsibilities, and the 529 plan is something, it's like a dessert. It's something that really is really, really good, but it's not your dinner. So if you're someone that's, let's say, just getting started, you have a young family, you're saving to buy that first house, that might be your first priority at this point. But the 529 plan, you might put some money to the 529, but it shouldn't be your main vehicle of investment.
Absolutely. So great topic this week. Obviously, next week, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about selling a business. So I know a lot of people get a lot of questions on that as it relates to tax as well. So tax and legal, great show coming up there. Tax and legal considerations when selling a business. But that's it for this week. Let's close this out. Is my little saying I randomly pulled out of thin air about 3 or 4 months ago. So same place, same time, technically, different week, different topic. I tweak it every week, right? Back here on the Teaching Tax Flow podcast. Hey everybody, John here from the Teaching Tax Flow team. Thank you as always for hanging out with us here on the podcast as we dove into those 529s. Again, I absolutely love the title of this. What's the 411 with 529s? Again, I can't take credit for it. The other guy came up with it. I got to give credit where credit is due. That being said, as Chris also mentioned, jump into Defeating Taxes, that private Facebook group. This is your open invite to dive in there. You would be actually surprised how many tax pros are in there, believe it or not. And really, sometimes they respond to the questions faster than we do, which we love to see. That's the whole point of that community, is to share information and help everybody move forward in defeating taxes in a non-negative way, right? We're doing it legally and ethically through everything we do and promote here through Teaching Tax Flow. So thank you again for everybody hanging out with us on this one. Thank you for, I don't remember who exactly submitted this question or suggested this topic, but thank you. You know who you are because I believe we talked about this. And again, we will see everybody back here next week on the podcast.
The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Cabin Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer. The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine the risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum.